Hi guys, happy Sunday and welcome to another video tutorial with me, Clarice. In this video, Sunday live, it's pre-recorded because I'll be at the Lavender farm painting with some lovely ladies and having a good time amidst beautiful lavender fields. However, the last time I was at the Lavender farm, this is what I taught people to do, and I made a reel which went semi-viral. And I even had Alyssa Milano like the reel, and it was such a big hit that I've decided to make it a Sunday special for y'all. So here we go. This is what we're going to be painting, and the following are the supplies that I will be using. So for today, we're going to be using the Saunders Waterford St. Cuthberts Mill watercolor paper. And this is also the paper that I have used for the King Protea video tutorial on my Skillshare, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. For brushes, I'll be using my Princeton Neptune round number 6, Princeton Velvetouch Petals number 6, and then I'm just keeping the Princeton Heritage round in a 0 handy in case I need it for tiny little details. For colors, I'm going to be using my Daler-Rowney set of 48. I've taken out the colors that I'm going to be using dominantly. It's going to be the ultramarine pink, cobalt violet, and then the quinacridone magenta. So those are going to be our purple pinks that we're going to be having in our fields. And then for the greenery, we're using olive green and hooker's green. I might even get burnt sienna or some sort of brown involved in case we want to get some darker hues of green happening. Okay, super excited for this paper because it was a fabulous experience painting this right here. But all the supplies are listed in the description below. However, you don't have to be using the exact same supplies. Feel free to sort of work with what you have. But in case you're interested in using the supplies I have, they're listed below. As always, before I begin, I just want to remind you guys, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, as it really does help my channel grow. And I can continue to make fabulous videos like this for you guys. Okay, I've got paper towel handy as well, just in case I need to dab excess water or just dab my brush and lighten the water load on it. I also have my water handy on the side, and I'm going to use my little palette area from the Daler-Rowney set of colors here to mix my purples. I already have a whole bunch of them mixed over here anyways. Okay, so here's what we're going to start off with. We're going to start off with dampening our area where we want to create our nice little blooms. That's the first thing we're going to tackle. We're going to dampen the area, get some nice combinations of the 3 purples that we have. So we get these mixed up first. And then using our number 6, we're going to get the color, and before the sheet dries up, we're going to splatter. So that's how we begin. So in fact, if you want to quicken the pace of dampening the area, if you want to do a large surface, I would suggest using a larger brush, either like a quill brush like this, or if you've got this gorgeous mottler, use the mottler. So actually I'm going to use the mottler for this. And then before I dampen, just like I mentioned, because it's key that we do our splatter before it dries up, I'm going to mix my colors first, and then we're going to go from there. So because I am, it's going to be a combination of these 3 colors, and I don't mind if they kind of intermingle. I'm going to start off with the darkest tone first. I'm going to keep this handy. And then I'm dampening my brush, or just wetting the brush, not dampening. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start by dampening my sheet here. Feel free to cover your table or your surface if you do not want to get a splatter outside of this area or an area that's going to get ruined. So I'm going over it several times just to make sure that the water has seeped in nicely and we get a nice damp area to start off with. So notice I'm not going all the way to the end of my paper because I want to try and keep a little bit of white space all around. So now that that's done, perfect, I'm going to take my second brush and I'm going to do my splatter. And this is how you get those beautiful blooms. Now before this dries up, I'm going to go ahead, dampen my brush again. This time I'm going to get the second color. And then splatter that in. It's a soft mauve hue and it goes beautifully with this purple. And then again, before it dries up, I'm going to take the last color, which is like the pinkyish hue, quinacridone magenta, and splatter before it dampens up. And as you'll notice, as it sort of tends to dry up, the splatter gets down darker. And gets down darker, I mean that it's not blooming as much into the paper because we've got like a semi-dry surface almost. So just because of that, and we've got like some beautiful pinks happening, I'm just going to get a little bit more of that purple, the first color that I had splattered, just a little bit here and there. And now we move on to our greens. So I'm going to use the Petals brush for my greens. And again, I'm just going to take it directly from my color cake. So I'm going to use a combination of the Hooker's green and I'm mixing it in with the olive green. And then we're just going to use the tip of this brush. I've done a few videos on how to use this brush. And we're going to create strokes of color, green color, or stems rather, and then we're even going to do leaves like this. You can do little, some of them can act like blades of grass. We just want to have a little bit of these sort of ghosted in the back, along with our nice beautiful hues of purple, pink, and mauve. And now I can tell that it's almost sort of drying up, but I'm still going to get just a couple more in here. We are trying to avail as best as we can, make use of the so-called wet on wet situation before it completely dries up. So I'm just lightly grazing, giving a little bit of movement to my stems as well. And then if you have referred to my video showcasing or tutorial on how to paint lavender, that would be helpful at this point. I'm going to make sure it's linked in the description below as well. And this way, if you're new to my channel and you have missed that video and you just don't know how to approach this, that might be a good start for you. So I'm just going to do a couple more in the center around here before we actually start painting our lavender. All right, So taking some of the purple directly from my color cake, this is the Cobalt Violet, and I'm using my number 6. You want to make sure that the tip of your brush is nice, fine, and pointed. And we're going to do, like I mentioned, we're going to start from the top, so we'll start with the lavender bits. And just think about where you want some placement, like your taller lavender strands should be in the center, and then as you kind of go outwards, they kind of fan out. So you get almost like a V shape happening, which would kind of help with the composition, make it look nice and pretty. So I'm going to start with the center here, and I'll do my tallest. And feel free to use a tinier brush. So all I'm doing is light little taps, kind of like a herringbone pattern. And I'm going to kind of spread this out a little bit here and there. Figure out where I want to place my little lavender buds before I go in with the second color and just kind of try dabbing some of that in here as well. Dipping the tip of my brush in water, I'm just going to get a lighter version of my purple and continue doing this. I'm going to add some at the center, at the center, going downward a little bit. So this is like a shorter strand. I'll add some over here too, and over here. Time is of the essence because while we're trying to do this, get our placements in, I'm trying to minimize how many times I wash my brush and get another color and go back in. So that's why I'm doing this first bit and rushing a little bit and being loose about it, but also because this is a loose style of painting. And then right after this, I'm going to lightly wash off my brush, or loosely wash off my brush, get that second color. And this is going to be a little bit more water involved in my mix. And then I'm sort of just dabbing it within the areas of our initial paint. You just want to dab a couple of strokes in between. And the reason we rushed is because while we're adding these little dabs of color, I want it to be damp still. So this way we get a nice blend from dark at the top going light to the bottom. And so I'm just dabbing rough hues, but we also want to leave white space. Make sure you're not getting rid of all the white space in between these little blobs of purple. Some can be the same purple. You can leave some kind of open-ended that way. I'm going to go in and get some of that pink now and drop some of that in as well, sparingly. Kind of hints of these colors here and there. And now at this point, you can see most of this has dried up. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the same technique all over again. This time we are going to start backwards. So I'll start with the pink, and then we'll slowly make our way to the other colors. But before we do that, before this dries up, why not get a little bit of our green using our petals and just kind of attach stems to these guys. This way we know exactly how much room we have to add more. So put what I had mentioned earlier on pause, get your petals brush, and just add your stems to these guys here. And the reason I'm doing this at this point is also in addition to knowing about placement and how much space we have, it would also be nice to get a beautiful little bleed of green happening within our purples. And that only can be achieved when it is damp. So this is why we are doing this right now. If you are having problems getting your nice thin lines, I would suggest taking a sheet of paper and just roughly kind of grazing the sheet with your brush. These exercises are so helpful in terms of brush control, getting some beautiful thicks and thins, because let's just face it, these are some quality brushes that really help you get some startlingly nice effects for your artwork. And all it takes is a little bit of practice so you know exactly how these work, and then your painting is a breeze almost. So let's see, I've got one more here. Got one there, one more here. We're almost sort of done this. Don't worry if the bottom of your stems start looking a little bit thicker as you go downward, because we are going to, if you reference the first image, we're gonna, at the end, we're going to really go in and fluff in and thicken up this area with darker green, so we get a nice depth happening and we get good contrast as well. Okay, so I think I have them all. Let's go back to our lavender bits, mixing the colors in and trying to get a nice bleed. So this time I'm getting the middle color, which is the ultramarine pink, and I'm going to start off with that and then use some of the other colors. So again, use your judgment where you want to place these. Herringbone pattern, starting with the one fine tip at the top, gently grazing as you go downward. I'm going to do one at the top here. Our little purple blooms in the back help to kind of give us an idea that there's more background sort of lavender happening, which is a nice soft effect. I'm going to add some in between here as well. I'm going to get some happening over here too. And then this is where it can get very interesting, because in the interest of time, you might not have too much time to sort of wash off your brush, and that's okay. Just go ahead, lightly wash it off, or just go right into the next color and just get that second color, because getting these beautiful mixes of color really help give more of a depth to our painting. So I'm going to get a little bit of that pink this time, and I'm just sort of lightly dropping it into these areas here. Again, I'm using the pink a little more sparingly in comparison to the purple. And now, last but not least, getting that purple and dropping it in. And it's such a beautiful effect, especially because you're getting so many different tones within your lavender. And then it ties it all together when we add our stems. Then it just doesn't look like little blobs of color, which are also very pretty, by the way. I'm going to get a little bit of that happening here because I want some nice movement and shape. I'm kind of shaping my bunch of lavender here a little bit. Drop some here just at the tip and then lightly bringing it downward. So this takes a lot of just kind of sitting back and seeing where you need to add more dabs to fluff in the area up. And this is why I suggest always starting off with something smaller, a smaller sheet, get used to it, and then move on to doing a larger sheet and just taking your time, relaxing into watercolor and just allowing yourself to be swept away with the therapeutic side of this. Now I'm going to add some in the center really quickly. Actually, let me just do the bits at the top first. We'll do some at the center here, and then we'll go back to our green. So you'll notice that the lavender color that I'm using here is a lot darker and it overlaps nicely. And that's why we always start from the lightest outward, going to the darkest. I'm going to add a little bit of that over here too, because this one was meant to have lavender at the top. There we go. So now let's get that Petals brush and add more of the green. So I've got the colors mixed, and here we go. Let's just join some of these guys first. And then more here. Now, the Petals brush takes a little bit of getting used to, so if you're finding it hard to get even thin, see kind of like this, don't be worried about it too much, because this is like a whole bunch of lavender. Like, we're trying to do lavender feels in a very loose fashion. However, if it's still bothering you, the fact that you're not able to achieve it, I totally understand. Take a regular brush which is like a number 1, kind of like the Heritage 0 that I have here, a regular round, and work with that. And that is also okay. I'm just adding stems to these guys, and then we can add blades of grass before we take one more step behind or take a step back and just really observe to see what we need to add in our painting. So you can see it's a lot of layering. It's great for a Sunday paint if you're looking to just sit down and relax. It's a lot of repetition, but a little bit of also composition, where I think it's very personal to each person what they would like to add and where. Okay, so I think everything has a stem. Oh, there's one that's missing in the center, so I'm going to add one over here. Then I noticed there's one here too. So now we're good to add some green. So I'm going to continue using this Petals, and I'm getting some of the Hooker's green, mixing it in with the olive green, and I'm getting something that looks like this. And so now, just to give you a reference where we're at, so you can see how I have filled it in with a lot of green and kind of like blades of grass happening. So that is what we're going to do, and then we're going to decide if we need to add any more lavender on top of that. So I'm also going to add some of the green to my number 6, because at the bottom I don't want strokes that are so thin. So I'm going to start off with adding a couple of strokes in between here. Feel free to get some color directly from your color cake. I'm going to add strokes of what can only be described as leaves within. So start from the bottom, press and trail upward, in between, kind of like really fluffing and adding more depth and variety to your painting. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to my green to kind of intensify that color at the bottom here. and I get a nice dark green. So again, you want to use this a bit sparingly just to kind of really intensify certain areas within your painting. Otherwise it's easy to sort of take over and then everything looks super dark. But you can see just by adding that dark color, it really brings out the rest of the light hues happening within. I'm going to add a couple of strokes in between. And then now switching to my petals, I'm going to get some of that olive green, and we're going to continue adding strokes of, or blades of grass rather. So you're just using the tip, pressing down to get those nice thin strokes. Feel free to do a little bit of overlapping if you must. I'm going to get some nice thin strokes of leaves happening within here from the bottom too. So notice how much white space is here at the bottom. You want to fill this up more as opposed to filling it up in between here. So if you need to fluctuate back to your number 6 round, go ahead, add a couple of more stems if you don't want to do only leaves, or make the leaves a lot smaller as well. And this way you're getting a variety of different sizes, and it just doesn't look like there's a whole bunch of thick leaves happening at the bottom. Variety is the spice of life. Really does add something nice to it all. So I'm even going to add a couple of strokes up here. Blades of grass sort of happening. One kind of just like twirling downward. Like really softening this whole composition up by even adding extra water, and then just adding a little bit of curves, or even like tendril kind of like elements just flopping outward. They're not tendrils, I know what tendrils are, but I meant in terms of softening it up by having grass elements that kind of are almost like tendrils, but they're not. So lighter in color, so more water, less color, and just like a softer feel. So you can see how I've gone super light in color here. And then the centers over here could use a little more fluffing, adding more stems to kind of really show that there's a lot of lavender. So I'm just going to continue fluffing, and I will be right back. Okay, so I've done my fluffing. I'm going back to my petals. I just want to add a few more strands of nice tall blades of grass happening. So to the center, remember I said it's going to be my tallest bit. And then, so that's the tallest. I'm going to add a few more little strokes here and there. You can get some nice delicate effects or shapes using your your petals by just kind of using the tip, pressing down, squiggling, and then trailing off on the tip. So I love using this as an after post painting fluffer, so to speak. And again, for those who are new, don't know what I'm referring to when I say fluffing, it's a term I have coined, and it simply means after we finished, where can I use little strokes of color or just add extra depth by adding more strokes. Be it the color, be it just kind of filling up the space to kind of get it more heavy at the bottom, light at the top, which really makes a huge difference. If you fast forward this video and go to the beginning where we had just a couple of strands, you'll see just how much of a difference that makes. And it's something that you can only figure out once you start painting and you realize these things for yourself. So just adding a couple of loose little tendril-like leaves within our lavender strands as well, because they do have very tiny little leafy elements. So this adds great bits of contrast because we've got all this heavy grassy elements, and then we've got these delicate little leafy elements happening there too within the lavender. Okay, so that is that. We are almost done. Here's what we have if we put them side to side, right? Just slight variation in color because I use my My Merry colors on this one. And these are the Daler-Rowney. So you can either choose to leave yours as is like this, or you can just go back in with your darkest purple and just intensify a couple of areas to make it more prominent. So for example, this part right here is really blended in. You might like that effect, in which case absolutely leave it. But if you want to intensify certain bits in this area here, which almost will end up giving this a hazy sort of look, kind of like how we started with the hazy background and now we got this on top. So it really adds more depth to your painting more than anything else. Love how that looks, but that's my personal preference. So once again, it is optional. You don't have to do that. Try it out. If you don't like it and you love the hazy look, just settle with the hazy look then. I'm going to add a couple of dots here and there in between. So it doesn't look like it's just the grass, but there's like tiny little bits of lavender happening. Getting some of that mid-mauve, the second color that I use, ultramarine pink. And I'm going to add just some dots, elements happening here. Like you could even end up doing more of a splatter towards this bit at this point, and that also works. And I will be doing a splatter as well, so just as soon as I am satisfied with how much I have happening. Always helpful to stand up and have a look at your piece before you make decisions. Sometimes it always looks, not sometimes, every time it looks different as you're sitting down and painting, but once you stand up, it's a completely different story. So that would be my 2 cents on that topic. And I think I am good right now. So I'm going to move on to doing my splatter. So here we go for splatter. I'm taking the color that I have on my brush, which is right here, dipping it in my color cake a little bit dipping it in water, taking the second brush, and I'm going to do the splatter exactly like how we started in the beginning. Except this time, I'm aiming it around the areas here, and my background is not damp. So we're getting more blobs, solid blobs, as opposed to soft little blooming blobs. I'm also putting some in this area here, so it kind of fluffs up these areas that have white, but not really covering it up fully. And again, splatter is beautiful. I love it, especially for lavenders or lavender strands. It just makes it seem so much a purple haze. Creating a purple haze. A beautiful purple haze. And the more water you have on your brush, the lighter the splatter. So I went dark first, and now I dipped my brush in water. So now I have a lighter splatter going on. So once this dries, I'll get a beautiful set of different hues happening within my painting. And that's it, guys. I hope you guys like this. Please don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you thought. And if you have any questions at all, I am happy to answer and help out, just in case certain things that I mentioned didn't quite make sense. All right. Thanks, guys, for watching, and have a happy Sunday. Bye now.